Trefen.
Order, and I call the National Assembly to order. And before I call the First Minister, I would like to welcome the parliamentary delegation from Botswana, headed by the Speaker of the National Assembly of Botswana, Her Excellency the Honourable Gladys Kokowe, who are present in the public gallery today. Welcome. The first item on the agenda are questions to the First Minister, and the first question from Mike Hedges.
Will the First Minister provide an update on the Swansea Bay City region?
Yes, sir. I would understand you've given your permission for questions 1 and 4 to be grouped. I can say that progress continues to be made in building collaboration and partnership around shared priorities for jobs and growth.
I believe that the Swansea Bay City region is developing very well as a vehicle for economic development. I, however, see a more strategic role for it in things like a structure plan. Does the First Minister agree? And will the First Minister look to use the footprint of the Swansea Bay City region for Welsh Government-funded public services?
Well, the city region has tremendous opportunity. I'd encourage all those looking at a city deal for Swansea Bay to put that bid in before the Chancellor's autumn statement, and it's important that local government leaders work together in order for that to happen. We've seen this happen in the capital region. The same thing needs to happen in Swansea Bay as well. But yes, as part of the work that the local government secretary has been carrying through in the summer, we are looking at how best to regionalise the delivery of services across Wales, where that is the most effective way of doing so.
Susie Davis.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, you'll be aware from questions last week that Assembly members were getting a little bit restless, that we weren't hearing much from the City Deal Board, but I'm pleased to say we've had a modest briefing from them now. From that, it seems that their major concern at the moment is the issue of governance in the short and medium term, and they've been working with Welsh Government suggesting a not-for-profit model for the future. Bearing in mind that this board is only convened for another 6 months or less than that, when will you be responding to them and what will you be saying to them?
Well, they are in the driving seat. The city deal is a matter for local government and not for Welsh Government. That said, of course, we are there to assist, as we did with the Cardiff City deal bid, but it is important now that they do work together to put a credible bid on the table.
Dai Lloyd.
Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Team that the situation is, quote, very fluid and the current prospects of success are about 50-50. So in view of that, what is the Welsh Government currently doing and what does it plan to do to support the bid team and increase the probability of success from 50-50?
Well, of course, it's a matter for local government to put the city deal bid in. Not for Welsh Government, but as I said in answer to the earlier question, we stand ready to assist, of course. We have been, as we did with the Cardiff City deal bid. And so any request for assistance, of course, will be looked at and assistance provided. And we have been working with the City Deal team in order for them, it is their responsibility to put forward a bid. We want to see a City Deal bid succeed for the Swansea Bay region.
David Rees.
For the First Minister, the City Deal is exciting and innovative. But it's focused on ICT and the next generation. Because this region has been built up on the traditional industries and manufacturing. What are you doing to ensure that that part remains a focus on City Deal, so the manufacturing that's existing and advanced manufacturing, particularly research areas, will be supported in the future?
Well, to me, both these things run together. It's hugely important that manufacturing in Wales is state-of-the-art, and that means working, of course, with the universities. I know Swansea University, which I know is in its constituency, has been working well with industry over many, many years, and indeed we've been working with them in order to see how best we can maximise the expertise and intellectual property that they develop.
Caroline Jones.
First Minister, if the Swansea Bay City region is to be a success, it will require collaborative working, not just between the 4 local authorities, but collaboration with the Cardiff City region and with the Welsh Government to ensure that the infrastructure is in place to support the ambitious plans put forward by the City Region Board. What infrastructure enhancements are the Welsh Government planning for the Swansea Bay region over the next 5 years, and how do you plan to connect the wider Swansea Bay region to the South Wales Metro project?
Well, we're looking, of course, at ways of creating a metro project in that region in years to come. Swansea, as a city, is an economic driver for the areas around it. It's important that people are able to get to Swansea easily as well. But I have to say, What would be hugely useful is if the UK government made good on its promise to electrify the South Wales main line as far as Swansea, something that they have so far steadfastly refused to do.
Vicky Howells.
Diolch Llawer. To date, Cynon Valley has been firmly aligned with the Cardiff City region, and while I welcome this association and the many benefits it may bring, in geographic and economic terms, my constituency also has many links with the Swansea Bay area. What assurances could you provide, First Minister, that the city region model will be flexible enough to incorporate the best interests of constituencies like my own, whose interests lie in both city regions?
Yes, I mean, the model has to be flexible to recognise economic reality, not political boundaries. We understand that. The city region, and the reason why Cynon Valley is in the city region along with Cardiff, is because of the tendency of the road links and the rail link particularly to come into Cardiff. But of course, as we know from the Bavistocks roundabout westbound, then of course there are links to Swansea as well. There is no reason why, of course, the two city regions can't work together. Rather than seeing themselves as collaborators for collective prosperity rather than competitors.
Question 2, Jenny.
Question 2, Jenny Rathbone.
What role does the First Minister envisage for councils in building social housing?
Well, local authorities will play a key role towards the delivery of our ambitious target of 20,000 affordable homes in this Assembly, and we're keen to support their work to build high-quality new social housing in the areas that they are responsible for.
Now, Cardiff Council is committed to building 600 new homes over the next 10 years, built to the highest energy standards, and that's created an extra 250 jobs. But this is great news, as it's the first time that Cardiff Council has built homes for a generation, but more needs to be done. Even the Tories are recognising that there is a housing crisis. So whether they'll actually do anything about it is another matter. But how can the Welsh Government ensure that local authorities, now that they've got themselves out of the housing revenue account, are going to be able to use their clout to borrow on excellent terms in order to build a lot more council housing?
Whilst the member is right, of course, to point out that Welsh local authorities are free in terms of the old HRAS system, there is nevertheless a cap still on borrowing that they have to observe. What I can say is that we're working with those authorities who wish to build new council housing to ensure that their borrowing cap is used to its fullest capacity in order to increase housing supply, and we'll continue to work with them in order to make sure that they're able to do that.
Simon Thomas.
Thank you, Llywydd, and I welcome the fact that councils are now starting to build council houses once again. But the main way of generating social houses is through housing associations, and I declare an interest as a member of a housing association. And a decision by the ONS to change the classification of housing associations in Wales to bring them into the public sector does have very serious repercussions for the Welsh Government in terms of the £2.5 billion debt that will be passed to government. So what steps is the government taking to exact this situation, and do you intend to legislate quickly to put this right?
Yes, we are. This is a problem, and we are considering a way of resolving this through legislation. And I can say that the housing associations can be confident that this will be resolved as soon as possible.
First Minister, do you agree that local authorities are perhaps best placed to be enablers by releasing land, or I think a model favoured in many European countries is to support neighbourhood and community groups that want to join together to build their own schemes? I see this as a way forward for many young people these days who are excluded from family housing to come together and agree these models where they're small, manageable for the future.
Yes, look, I wouldn't go so far as to say that local authorities can only be enablers. They are important builders of houses as well. But it's not the only model that we understand. We know that housing associations will continue to be important in the provision of affordable homes and, of course, innovative new solutions. We've talked in the past of community land trusts, of shared equity schemes. Cooperative housing schemes, I believe, are certainly models that can be explored fully in the future, and we would seek to provide what support we can in order for those models to be taken forward.
Michelle Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, areas across Wales have a substantial amount of brownfield land that could be used to build social and affordable housing. Brownfield sites are often an unknown quantity though, and if we add into the mix the potential on some sites for contamination by asbestos, lead and other substances, it is easy to see why developers are often not prepared to take the risk of developing a brownfield site. This puts yet more pressure on local authorities to permit building on open green spaces, or much needed housing is simply not built. What measures is the Welsh Government prepared to take to incentivise developers to build on brownfield sites rather than greenfield sites? And what assistance is the Welsh Government prepared to give to developers to support them in the decontamination of brownfield sites?
Well, there are examples of brownfield sites that are being built on across Wales, not too far away from here. The old Ely Mill site is being redeveloped. The member is right to point out that we do have a legacy where, in the days when environmental regulations were far more lax than they are now, where operators of sites no longer exist as companies, and therefore the liability then falls on the taxpayer. It is something that we have been wrestling with, for example, with some of the bigger open cast sites in terms of where liability ultimately should lie, given the permissions they were given in the early 1990s. We'll look to work with developers, of course, in order to make sure that land is made available in the future. But it is true to say there are still some sites where a substantial amount of money would be needed in order to remediate those sites to the level needed for housing.
Cwestiynau nawr gan yr...
We now turn to questions from the party leaders. Leader of the Opposition, Leanne Wood.
I wonder if the First Minister can tell us whether he knows how long it takes to travel from Aberdaron on the Llyn Peninsula to Ysbyty Glan-Clwyd, if we assume no traffic and no poor weather.
Oh, it would be a journey, I suspect, of some 2 hours, depending on the traffic, of course.
Yeah, that's about right, First Minister. It's about 2 hours.
I know Wales pretty well.
The reaction to when the First Minister answers a question correctly is very interesting. First Minister, 2 hours by ambulance, I'm sure you would agree with me, would be way too long. Now, you may or you may not be aware of proposals to centralise vascular surgery in Ysbyty Glan-Clwyd, removing it from Ysbyty Gwynedd in Bangor. Well, actually, it operates across 2 sites. It operates in Wrexham Mylor as well. Now, this is despite the fact that the service in Ysbyty Gwynedd is one of the best in the world. And it's not just me saying that, that's published data showing that. Can you tell us, therefore, First Minister, why your government is proposing to remove a world-class service from Ysbyty Gwynedd?
Well, far from it. I mean, we want to make sure that there is a specialist centre. It's happened all across the rest of Wales. And it's important that people who live in the area of Betsy Cadwallader that do have the ability to have a very strong specialist vascular unit. I think the question is not that there should be a specialised unit, but where it should be placed. And I understand the points that have been made, particularly by her colleague, the member for Arfon, that further consideration should be given to looking at other sites and not just Glan-Clwyd. But that said, the Community Health Council have supported the proposals, I understand, so far. The board will be considering the matter further at its October meeting, and that might be an opportunity for those who are unhappy with the decision so far to make their voices heard.
Just to be clear, First Minister, it's your government that will sign off the final decision on this, and we already have an excellent service, and it's located in Ysbyty Gwynedd. Now, when the Royal Glamorgan lost its vascular surgery service, other services there became unviable. Now, clinicians have raised serious concerns with me about the safety of imposing urban models of healthcare upon rural areas. And your government is imposing a one-size-fits-all model right throughout the country. If Ysbyty Gwynedd loses its vascular surgery, it'll make the medical school in Bangor, which we want, much less viable. It'll also mean that people from Ynys Môn, Penllyn and other places travelling far too long for vital limb or life-saving surgery. Will you therefore commit today, First Minister, to protecting the world-class vascular service at Ysbyty Gwynedd?
We want to protect the world-class vascular service for the whole of Betsy Cadwallader. We'll consider all the representations that are made. The Health Board will consider it next. I have to say, she makes the point about urban solutions in rural areas. I'm sorry, that's sometimes used as a slightly worse service for rural areas than in urban areas. And I disagree. I think people who live in rural areas should have access to the best services that are available. I remember this argument about colorectal surgery and bronchitis. I remember it, that it was going to leave, that cancer surgery, colorectal cancer surgery would leave bronchitis, and as a result, things would be far worse. They weren't, they were far better. Survival rates improved dramatically, even though people had to travel to Cardiff. That much is true. And so the board will have to consider these issues very, very carefully. I understand the point she's making, and her colleague has made exactly the same points as, of course, she, as the member for Avon, I would expect it to do. The board must consider the points that are being made, and ministers will consider any representations, but we wouldn't get away from the fact there needs to be a specialist centre. The question then is, where should it be placed?
On behalf of the Leader of the Welsh Conservatives, Paul Davis.
Breakfast time.
First Minister, getting access to a GP is becoming more and more of an issue for communities across Wales, and this is especially so for working people. Can you tell us what percentage of GP surgeries across Wales currently offer appointments after 6 p.m?
The majority offer appointments at least one evening a week, but could I say to the temporary leader of the Welsh Conservatives that his party today have made announcements that will make it far more difficult to recruit doctors, not just into England, where the announcement was made, but across the whole of the UK. What kind of message does his party give to doctors who want to come to the UK to work when his own Prime Minister says there will be staff here from overseas in the interim period until further numbers of British doctors are able to be trained, and where Damien Green said that doctors are welcome whilst they're needed? Well, I'm afraid he can't have it both ways. He can't, on the one hand, complain that there aren't enough doctors when his own party in London is doing all that it can to make sure that doctors don't come here in the first place.
Well, clearly, it's time that the First Minister takes responsibility for the Welsh NHS. Clearly, he wants to talk about England in order to deflect his own failings. So let me give him the answer to my original question. Only 29% of GP surgeries across Wales currently offer appointments after 6 p.m, which is an appalling statistic considering the priority your government gave access to GPs in the last Assembly. Because in the 2011 manifesto, Welsh Labour said it would require GPs to make surgeries more accessible to working people. The manifesto also said it would instigate a programme of annual health checks for everyone over the age of 50, led by GPs, practice nurses, pharmacists and other health professionals. We've heard your government on countless occasions promise to reform the way people across Wales access everyday health services. Yet in 2016, we've seen no tangible improvement. Why did you ditch the commitment for face-to-face annual health checks with GPs for everyone over the age of 50?
Well, let's have some figures. In 2015, 97% or 440 practices offered appointments at any time between 5 and 6:30 in the evening on at least 2 weekdays. That's the reality. The same percentage as 2014. That is the reality of the figures. I don't know where his figures come from.
Well, I don't know where the First Minister is getting his figures from.
Official
and
figures.
He didn't answer the second question about why he ditched the health checks for over 50s. Now, your recent programme for government said it will again improve access to GP surgeries, making it easier to get an appointment. Well, the people of Wales have heard all this before from you and from previous Labour governments. Clearly, you've failed to improve the situation over the last 5 years. Why on earth should the people of Wales trust you this time? So if your government wants to improve accessibility to GP surgeries, what strategic benchmarks will you now put in place to improve accessibility by 2021, given that you published no targets whatsoever in the current programme for government?
We've delivered, and the people of Wales recognise that in May. They keep on. It's like watching. He's no different to his leader. It's like watching a fly constantly batting itself into a window and not making any progress at all. Well, let me help you with some more figures. In 2015, 82% 373 practices were open for daily core hours, 8 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Monday to Friday, an increase from 80% in 2014, on top of the access that I mentioned early on. The reality is he's got his figures wrong, and we delivered on our promises.
Arweinydd grŵp UKIP.
Leader of the UKIP group, Neil Hamilton.
First Minister, last week at the Labour Party conference, Diane Abbott, the Shadow Health Secretary at Westminster, said that people who voted for Brexit did so because largely they want to see less foreign people on the streets. Does he not think that this is a slander on the 62% of the people in Blaenau Gwent who voted for Brexit, the 60% in Torfaen, indeed the 55% in Bridgend who voted for Brexit?
Well, I can't answer for comments made by other people. What I can say is that I don't think people voted to see doctors deported, which is what the Tories want to do today.
No doctor is going to be deported. That's an absurd thing to say. But they certainly wouldn't be. They certainly wouldn't be deported under a Labour government, because it's clear from the Labour Party conference that the Labour Party doesn't believe in any serious immigration controls at all. Indeed, Jeremy Corbyn's spokesman said that he was relaxed about the prospect of higher immigration and doesn't believe in reducing it. Mr Corbyn's aides apparently said that it's not an objective to reduce immigration, and that Jeremy Corbyn believes the best way to deal with immigration across Europe is to harmonise wages in every country. Considering that the average wage in Romania is £100 a week, in Bulgaria is £80 a week, does the First Minister think that this is a sensible policy for controlling immigration?
Well, I mean, I've seen a leader of UKIP is they're quick to defend the Tories. Well, I mean, Damien Green was asked several times. I saw it by Andrew Neil. Are you saying that doctors will be deported? And he just wouldn't answer the question. What he said was that they're welcome whilst they're necessary. Then, of course, he went on to say, well, of course, under a Labour government, there wouldn't be any deportations. As if that was a bad thing. A bad thing. He wants to see deportations, it seems to me. The reality is that we in Wales offer a welcome to doctors. We offer a welcome to people who come and live in our country on an annual basis. We'd even offer him a welcome if he chose to live in Wales as well.
Realise that the First Minister was an extremist, but there is no possibility of anybody being deported from Wales or the United Kingdom as a result of Brexit, because, as the First Minister well knows, the rights of those who are already here are protected under Britain's existing treaty obligations that are not relevant to the EU. But what matters is that we take into this country in future those who we need, and we can choose who comes here, and that is the essence of any sovereign nation's power.
Well, if it was thought that offering him a welcome if he chose to live in Wales was the mark of an extremist, then I apologise in that regard. But he is nevertheless welcome to live in our country if he so chooses to do so. But one thing I can say to him is we need doctors. There is no health service anywhere in the developed world that doesn't recruit doctors from other countries. And the reality is a quarter of our medical staff comes from overseas. And the message that's been given today is, if you are not from the UK, don't come to the UK. You're not welcome. Because if you get a job, you will lose that job as soon as somebody else comes forward, even though it might take 10 or 15 years to do so. We will continue to recruit good doctors for the health service in Wales, whilst others try to create a situation where fewer and fewer doctors are available to treat our people.
Question 3,
Question 3, Margaret Reckless.
Does the First Minister expect all current CAP payments made in Wales to be added permanently and unconditionally to the block grant?
All current payments, I would expect, yes. What I would not be supportive of is that if those payments happen to be barnetised, because that would mean that we would be worse off.
Of course, I applaud and share the First Minister's ambition in this field. Many farmers have said to me that they would like to see Welsh Government spending on agriculture and rural development ring-fenced. Is that a commitment the First Minister would consider giving, perhaps in the context of UK Government guarantees of future funding and policy autonomy for Wales?
I think it's possible to do so until 2020. That's what we aim to do. Beyond that, there is no money at all to pay farming subsidies unless the UK Government gets its act together and tells us exactly what it plans to do. So, yes, we would look to support farming. as if we had still been members of the European Union whilst the funds are available. But if there are no funds beyond 2020, it stands to reason that we will not be able to do so.
Hugh Ranka Davis.
Diolch, Llywydd. It was fascinating the other day, First Minister, to see a representation made by 35 Conservative MPs saying we should seize this opportunity to look anew, post-2020, at how we actually use what they termed public funds for public gains as well, such as environmental gains, flood alleviation and so on. The immediate issue is Brexit and making sure we work with farmers to get what's right for Wales and Welsh farmers. Post-2020, is he looking forward? Is he scanning what the opportunities might be there to make sure that we realise the widespread benefits of good landscape management as well as food production? And is he doing that in concert with the UK government? Are they on the same hymn sheet?
No, is the answer to that. But I can say that the Minister has already been holding meetings looking to develop what a future rural policy, including agriculture, of course, might look like. It's true to say that we will have greater flexibility and greater power. What we don't know is we'll have any money in order to implement these things. So the UK government does have to declare, in line with the promise that not a penny will be lost to Wales, that in fact agricultural payments will be maintained, not just for Wales, but Scotland and Northern Ireland as well, to provide certainty for farmers. Because at the moment, after 2020, farming is staring at a future without any public subsidy. It is not ready for that. If we're honest, I'm somebody who knows full well the value of farming payments, not just to farms, but to rural communities and to the Welsh language, for example. Beyond 2020, we have no certainty at all whether there will be a brass farthing available to pay for these things, and we need that certainty.
Simon Thomas.
Diolch, Llywydd.
Thank you, Llywydd. What are the opportunities now to put the situation right in terms of payments to farmers and payments that are seen as environmental payments to create one national scheme for Wales, which is agri-environmental in its whole? And within that context, isn't it also true that you have food, which is nutrition, healthy, local and environmentally sustainable, which is also a public good?
It is. It doesn't mean to say that we can feed ourselves, because 54% of the food produced or eaten in the UK is actually produced in the UK. But having said that, of course, we wish to ensure that producers can be sustainable and that they can produce saleable food and people wish to buy it. That's all important. There is an opportunity to reconsider Pillar 1 and Pillar 2, and that, of course, comes under the CAP. And if the CAP no longer exists, there will be opportunities to see whether we want to put that line there in the future. So there are opportunities in the future, and there's an opportunity for farmers to help shape the policy for the future, but we have to have the funding to ensure that that can happen.
First Minister, I completely agree with you that the last thing we need is for the current cap payments to be squeezed through what you can only term the Barnet mangle. This risks future underfunding in Wales more than that which we've seen. What discussions have you had with the UK government regarding creating a system of farm support that isn't subject to the Barnet formula and supports farmers on a basis of need, and perhaps even factors in a greater degree of production, which farmers themselves have been calling for?
Production subsidies are very much a two-edged sword. I remember when we had production subsidies and we produced probably 25% too much in terms of sheep meat particularly, and the price was depressed as a result. We have to produce what the market will bear and not what we think people want, what people need to buy, because the reality is we'll overproduce and we'll see the price drop. So that has to be managed very, very carefully. I know that Leslie Griffiths has had meetings on this very issue. I think it's fair to say that the UK government has no idea what farming policy should look like in the future. It's also true to say that it has no real idea of the nature of devolution when it comes to farming policy. From our perspective, what we want to see is autonomy for Wales in terms of farming policy, amongst others, together, of course, with a fair share of the money that we are told will be made available as a result of Brexit.
Question 5, Jane.
Question 5, Jane Bryant.
The opportunity to work with the Office for National Statistics.
Well, we work with the ONS across a range of issues, including the census, of course, economic statistics, the National Survey for Wales, and, of course, the development of the new data campus.
Thank you, First Minister. The ONS's new data science campus is being established in Newport. The campus aims to build world-leading expertise in data science and benefit from faster, richer economic, social and environmental data. The campus will also carry out cutting-edge research for the public good, exploiting the growth and availability of innovative sources. Several data science apprentices under the Welsh Government scheme will be filled, and an MSc in Analysis for Government will start in 2017, working with a number of universities. This will help to develop significant expertise in this area and presents an opportunity to create a data hub around the ONS in Newport by attracting other companies. What can the Welsh Government do to support and encourage this development for the benefit of the Welsh economy?
Well, the creation of the campus is a great boost for the region. It shows our tech sector is thriving, and we've been working with the ONS to help them to maximise the benefits for Wales. It does provide us with an opportunity as a government to explore the use of new sources of data and to encourage more intelligent use of data and analytics within the public sector, and we're already considering what potential projects we might be able to move forward with the help of the ONS.
Russell George.
Following the ONS reclassification of housing associations, will you, First Minister, set out whether you are intending on making legislative changes similar to that of the UK government in England to retain the status of housing associations as independent social businesses, following, of course, changes brought about through the last UK government's Housing and Regeneration Act?
I refer the member to the answer I gave to Simon Thomas in question 1.
Mark Reckless.
With respect to the ONS data centre and the link with economics, I worked as an economist previously and hugely benefited from relations with ONS statisticians. There was a time when the ONS was emphasising on selling data and using it to bring in revenue to government, but now has a policy of open data. Does the First Minister agree that the Welsh Government should support that in its own approach, and also there could be huge opportunities for companies to come to Newport, benefit from its improving connections and that broad supply of data and expert statisticians we will have in Newport?
These things have to be looked at. I understand that. The Chief Digital Officer will be considering issues such as this, but we know, for example, that in March this year we did see the publication of the first open data plan for Wales. And that contains our thoughts in terms of how that matter can be developed in the future.
Question 6, Julie.
Question 6, Julie Morgan.
Councillors, the Welsh Government have to reduce the prevalence of domestic abuse in Wales.
We're committed to eliminating all forms of domestic abuse, and we're currently consulting on the National Strategy on Violence Against Women, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence, which, when finalised in November, will set out our key objectives over the next 5 years.
I thank the First Minister for that reply. I'm sure the First Minister is aware of the reports from the NSPCC Cymru last week that they have seen a big rise in the number of adults calling them worried about children suffering from or witnessing physical and emotional domestic abuse. And the number of the calls to the NSPCC, I believe, has gone up 63% over the last 6 years. What further can be done by the Welsh Government to tackle the issue of domestic abuse, and in particular the damaging effect it has on young people's lives?
Well, NSPC Cymru is represented on the Ministerial Advisory Group, so we have established links with them to consider this report and to take any work forward. But I can say in the national strategy, we committed to working with all the relevant partners to ensure we tackle adverse childhood experiences to reduce health harming and antisocial behaviours in adult life. We need to look at this issue in the most holistic way possible, looking at eliminating the causes of domestic violence rather than simply, as it were, dealing with the aftermath. And so that approach is reflected in the work the Ministerial Advisory Group has taken forward.
Bethan Jenkins.
First Minister, Gwent Police is taking part in a 3-force pilot scheme which will see frontline officers primed to look out for coercive or controlling behaviour when attending domestic abuse incidents. This switch to detecting patterns of abusive conduct following on from new laws introduced to tackle perpetrators who subject spouses, partners or other family members to controlling or coercive behaviour, and is aimed at tackling a range of conduct such as social media, spying on them online, stopping them from socialising, and offenders can have up to 5 years in jail. I'm wondering if you're taking this into consideration on a Gwent level, and then something that can be looked at across the board here in Wales.
I think that's a good model. I worked for many years in the family courts and dealt with many domestic violence cases. And of course, the issues that the most difficult to prove were those that involved psychological harm. When somebody has been attacked and that attack leaves physical evidence, then of course it's there for all to see. But it could be quite difficult, of course, to deal with people who were controlling, who inflicted psychological violence. In those days, there was no social media. There is now. So I do very much welcome what Gwent Police are doing in order to go underneath, looking at what appears to be a normal situation on the surface and delve deeper in order to make sure that psychological violence is not being displayed and that they can identify it early on.
Mark Isherwood.
Thank you. You'll recall that when we debated stages 3 and 4 of the legislation last year, Violence Against Women Act, the then Minister, although not accepting the need to include reference to perpetrator programmes, committed the Welsh Government then to gather further evidence on taking forward pre-custodial perpetrator programmes. What action is your government doing to facilitate that?
Well, these are issues that are being taken forward via the Ministerial Advisory Group and, of course, via the strategy. The strategy will aim to be all-encompassing, dealing with the issues that the member has raised in order, as I mentioned earlier on, to make sure that issues are dealt with early on, rather than, of course, dealing with the aftermath and the trauma that causes for the victim.
Caroline Jones.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, since the introduction of the offence of controlling or coercive behaviour, only a handful of charges have been brought. Is it therefore welcome news that police forces across the country will be training officers to recognise the signs of controlling or coercive behaviour, similar to Bethan's, I apologise. However, we need to inform the public that domestic violence isn't restricted to physical abuse. How can the Welsh Government help spread the message that psychological and emotional abuse is a crime that won't be tolerated, and to make the public more aware? Thank you.
We will continue to ensure that message is received. As I say, the strategy that will be looking to take that forward. Creating an offence is one thing. Finding enough evidence to prosecute can be tougher. And that often involves making sure that people are aware that there's an offence in the first place, which can be, which is half the battle sometimes. And secondly, of course, making sure that somebody who wishes to give evidence feels safe in order to do so, and feels that there will be an outcome for them and that they will be protected in the future. So it isn't simply a question, as she says, about creating the offence. It's making sure that the offence is actually followed through and investigated properly by the police. She's given examples of where that is happening, and then, of course, ultimately successful prosecutions.
Question 7, Mohammed.
Question 7, Mohammed Ashkar.
Officer, will the First Minister make a statement on the Welsh Government's digital competence framework, please?
Yes, it was made available to schools on the 1st of September.
Thank you for the quick answer, Minister. Online social media platforms can be used by offenders to make contact with children who are unaware of the sinister intentions which may lie behind a seemingly innocent exchange. The NSPCC has called for online safety lessons to become part of the curriculum so children can recognize the signs of this behavior and its dangers. Will the First Minister confirm that the online safety lessons will form part of digital competence framework in Wales?
Yes, I mean, this is part of what the framework will look to achieve. I mean, actually, I know that schools do give lessons in terms of internet safety. I've certainly been aware of that with my own children, and others will have the same experience. But it's true to say that building on the good work that schools have displayed so far, we want to make sure that children are as fully aware as they can be of what lurks out there online. And we know that for many offenders, they will go to great lengths sometimes in trying to place young children in a position of vulnerability. And so their safety is paramount.
Llyr Griffith.
Thank you, Llywydd. The Digital Competence Framework, of course, is one of a number of frameworks which are to be introduced over the next few years. And one concern that's been expressed, of course, is a lack of time within the academic year as it's currently structured to train and prepare teachers and educators to take full advantage of these frameworks, given that there's only around 5 days available for training within a year for teachers. So how do you intend to ensure that they are armed to use these new frameworks to their full extent?
Two things, of course. The new curriculum will give us ensure that there's an opportunity not just to teach but also to train, and then secondly with the devolution of the terms and conditions of teachers, we could then consider the nature of training and what kind of training would be more beneficial for teachers. The current system has been in place for many years now, and I think we need to reconsider it in order to give more training to teachers and to give them what they need.
Question 8, Jeremy Miles.
What role does the First Minister envisage for specialist epilepsy nurses in delivering care and support to those living with epilepsy?
Well, the Neurological Conditions Delivery Plan for Wales and the 2008 Wales Neuroscience Review do recognise the important role that neurology specialist nurses, such as those caring for people with epilepsy, can have in supporting people to manage their condition effectively.
I thank the First Minister for that response. Does he agree that in addition to improving the quality of care for patients living with epilepsy, specialist epilepsy nurses can also reduce costs to the NHS by reducing the call on consultants' time on hospital admissions and emergency readmissions? And would he encourage local health boards to actively develop investment cases to employ more specialist epilepsy nurses?
Yes, I would. I mean, we know that there are good examples across Wales of where epilepsy nurses have been hugely useful, not just to the patient, but of course to the health service as a whole, in terms of being able to deal with conditions quickly and as close as possible to the patient. As far as the health boards are concerned, we do expect them to consider the staffing mix required to deliver neurological services to their local population and tailor it accordingly. And that would mean, of course, looking at having a sufficient number of epilepsy nurses in order, of course, to not just to provide a service, but to lessen pressure on the service further on down the line.
Angela Burns.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, given that recent reports have suggested we should have 88 epilepsy nurses in Wales, and we've currently got 9, and given the shortages that we have, or the difficulties we have in recruiting people, I'm not going to go and ask you to find 81 extra nurses overnight. However, what we could do is run specialised epilepsy clinics on a more frequent basis. Scotland has 5 such clinics for just over 5 million people, and Northern Ireland has 2 for just under 2 million people. So that's about a million people per clinic, and their populations are served well. Here in Wales, we've got 1 centre based in Cardiff for just over 3 million people, and it is an absolutely known fact that 70% of people with epilepsy could have their seizures better controlled if they had access to such services. And at the moment, we're only just over the 50% mark in Wales. So whilst we can't magic up another 81 epilepsy nurses overnight, perhaps getting neurologists to hold a few more clinics in a more fair and accessible way throughout Wales could help us achieve the same.
Well, I can say we've committed £1 million annually to support the National Implementation Group for the Neurological Conditions Plan to improve services in Wales. As a result of that allocation, I know that the neurological conditions and stroke groups have jointly committed £1.2 million to support community neuro rehab services, and that investment across Wales will bring considerable benefits to patients and provide greater equity of access as well to services across Wales.
Question 9, Rhiannon.
Question 9, Rhiannon Passmore.
Would the First Minister provide an update on the performance of the Welsh Ambulance Service?
Yes, in August, the Welsh Ambulance Service responded to 78.1% of the most life-threatening calls, known as red calls, and that means it's met its target for the 11th successive month and the best ambulance performance since the introduction of the clinical response model pilot last October.
Thank you for that answer. And obviously the First Minister has mentioned the fact that the Welsh Ambulance Service has responded again to almost 81% of the most life-threatening calls in 8 minutes or less in August, and in doing so has met the target for the 11th successive month. And that is a huge testimony to our Welsh ambulance staff. So would the First Minister state the response rates for my constituency of Is-deitlau since the introduction of the clinical response model pilot last October, and indeed what this demonstrates about the performance of the Welsh Ambulance Service for my constituents?
Well, I can say to the member that red performance within the Aneurin Bevan board area was 79.6% in August, above the national average, and performance in this area has improved by more than 10 percentage points over the course of the last year.
Question 10, David.
Question 10, David Melding.
What are you doing to improve voter participation, especially in young people?
Well, we continue to work with our partners to encourage people to register, first of all, and to vote ahead of the local government elections in 2017. Assuming the Wales Bill, of course, is satisfactory as far as this institution is concerned, and it gains parliamentary approval, we'll be in a position to consider the best use of new powers in electoral matters.
And one use may be to lower the voting age to 16 for our elections, and this was thought to have transformed voter participation amongst younger people in Scotland when the law was changed for the Scottish referendum. It would also allow us very elegantly to promote in the 14 to 18 age group a whole sort of new concept of civics education and voter participation. This is something we really need to do. You know, citizens have to be aware of their responsibilities as well in terms of keeping a healthy democracy going, and education is key to that.
It is absolutely key to it. When I meet people on the doorstep and they tell me that they don't vote, I ask them to repeat what they've just said, but actually you're using their voice, and say, well, there we are. You haven't got a voice if you don't vote. If you said to me, I do vote, why should I vote for you? Then politicians take notice. And it's sad that we've seen the decline really since I'd say the mid-90s in voter participation, which, if we're honest as politicians, it's very difficult to understand the reason or reasons for that. We know in Scotland the turnout was high in the independence referendum, but one of the things we have done, for example, is to fund an NUS Wales and Democracy Club website, Where Do I Vote? It was launched in March of this year. It enables students and others to find the polling station they were registered at, and it covered 10 of the 22 local authority areas, accounting for around 47% of Welsh electors.
Diolch i'r Prif Weinidog.
I thank the First Minister. I have accepted two